Initiating podcast download. Prepare yourself. Put on your spandex. Lace up your boots. Wrap your wrists. Hide your razor blade. Head to gorilla position. Grease up your hair. Apply baby oil. Okay, apply more baby oil. Get into gimmick. Keep your ears open and your mouth shut. Have fun and be safe out there, brother. Welcome to Iron on Wrestling. Now your host, Gregory Iron.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Iron on Wrestling with Gregory Iron. I'm your host, Gregory Iron, and this is episode 264. And I hope it's not a bore to listen to me for whatever amount of time I decide to talk with you this week on the show. Thank you for showing up here as always. And I'm actually recording this on a Wednesday. So if you're listening to this now at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time when the show drops, for the regular listeners on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you download podcasts, I've freshly recorded this one. If you're listening to this on Patreon, hopefully you got it a little bit earlier. I've been running behind. I was on vacation this past week, and I extended it an extra day. I went out to Orlando for my yearly adventure with the Gargano family, that of course being Johnny, Candace, Quill, and an assortment of other Garganos, Shirley, which is Candace's cousin, Autumn, which is Candace's niece, and Shirley's boyfriend, Andy, very nice gentleman. And we went to Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studios, which was a blast, and we ended up going to Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party, which we do every year. Last couple years, if you recall, we were the Rescue Rangers from, Chippendale. We were also the dinosaurs last year. I, of course, was Robbie Sinclair, the teenage one, and this year we were the X-Men. And there was a lot of dedication needed from me during this event because I was Morph, which means I had to change costumes. Photos were posted on social media, on Johnny Gargano's Instagram, as well as his Twitter, Candace's as well. I shared those on my social media, but there's going to be a vlog about it next week. And so I figure by the time you listen to the next week's episode, that vlog will be out, and I will elaborate on all of those events when I talk with Aaron, who will be back in the building next week. I had to do this the last second to get this up for you guys. On Patreon, I'm hoping to have some bonus content for you this week, and I might even stop by Aaron's studio to get you a bonus episode, but I will be uploading some more stuff for you guys. Appreciate you sticking with the show and supporting us however you do, whether it be through merchandise on ProWrestlingTees.com/Gregory Iron, or of course Patreon.com/Iron Wrestling, where you get a buttload of bonus content starting at $3, audio podcast, extended episodes, early releases of the episodes, extra episodes, video. You get to pick bonus podcast subjects. If you're in the $9 tier, you get involved in live chats with me once a month, which I do believe we'll be doing one coming the beginning of November, so stick around for that. And you can get things in the mail if you go $25 and up, and it's the best way to support the podcast, and I thank you for doing so. But I'll give you the updates on all the Universal Studio and Disney stuff. Also, something that I probably will not talk about in the regular podcast. If I do, I'll touch on it a little bit. The reason why I'm running behind schedule with the podcast this week was I ended up spending an extra day in Orlando because I was invited to WWE NXT. And it was a great experience. I'm definitely going to talk about it on Patreon, but I also give you some deets on the regular show next week when I talk to Aaron, so stick around for that stuff. But I don't think you guys want to hear me ramble about my vacation and how enjoyable it was. I mean, if you do, you'll tune in next week, right? But what I've been hyping up for the last week and a half has been a Q&A, and I got a lot of questions for you guys. Something like 70 or 80 questions. I don't know how many I'm going to do today, but I wanted to get some started, and I wanted to prioritize Patreon, of course, and because, you guys are the most loyal supporters. You've been there since the beginning for me, and got a lot of good questions, so I'm going to try to get in as many as I can over the next hour or so. Let's get started. First questions come from Josh Excellence, Patreon.com supporter, of course. He said, how was your birthday? Favorite good and favorite bad Halloween Havoc matches and angles? Did you watch Joker Folie à Deux? Is that how you say it? I don't know. I don't think anyone knows how to say it unless you're French. Have you watched The Penguin? Do you believe in ghosts? A lot of questions there. A lot to unpack. How was my birthday? My birthday was great. I got a lot of nice gifts from Hannah. I got to visit one of my favorite local vintage toy stores, that being Applejack's in Lakewood, Ohio. And, I ate some good food, had some good times. Part of my birthday, I guess my birthday has been continuing since the 12th because that's kind of my treat when I go to Disney and Universal. It's on behalf of Johnny and Candace. And I also got a nice little bootleg Mickey WCW tank top from Johnny and Candace, as well as a WCW hat. So pretty pumped about all those things. Very blessed in my old age of 38. Favorite good and favorite bad Halloween Havoc matches and angles. I mean, I don't think you get any better or worse than Halloween Havoc 1995. That, of course, is the Giant and Hollywood Hulk Hogan. Well, he wasn't Hollywood at that point. I'm sorry, Hulk Hogan. But he was embracing the dark side of Hulkamania and wearing all black. They, of course, had the Sumo Monster Truck battle on top of Cobo Hall in Detroit. And Giant was tragically killed when he was pushed off the top of the building, or so we thought. And he fell into the water, which we were led to believe, but that doesn't really make sense because if you live in Detroit or if you are anywhere near Cobo Hall at any point in your life, you'll notice that it is not next to water. So if the Giant was pushed off the building, he wouldn't have fell in the water. He would have just hit the concrete and went splat. Nevertheless, they pushed this angle that he had been pushed into the water and he was going to make it for the main event. Hollywood. Why do I keep calling him Hollywood? It's because I'm seeing him in all black, so I keep going to Hollywood. Hulk comes to the ring, and he looks very somber. And he announces that the Giant isn't going to make it because... And then the Giant comes out unscathed, not wet from falling in the water, nothing. He's perfectly fine. They have one of the worst matches you'll ever see. I challenge you, actually, to find one Hulk Hogan and Paul White match that was actually good. Because I don't think it exists. They were all bad. This one at Halloween Havoc, the one at Hog Wild, which is probably the most famous because that's where Hollywood Hogan wins the WCW title and spray paints it with the NWO logo. Sold out in 97. Honestly, I would have a hard time picking which one is the worst. I'd have to go back and watch all three. And do I really want to watch that trilogy? I don't fucking know. I don't know if I do. This, of course, is the debut of the Yeti as well at Halloween Havoc. I can come back to some bad memories, but you can't talk about Halloween Havoc without mentioning Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero. 97, one of the best matches you'll see. My fandom, of course, is later 90s WCW. So you talk about that. If you want to talk about Goldberg's greatest match ever, I still think to this day it's versus DDP at Halloween Havoc 98. On the flip side of that, on the same pay-per-view, we have one of the worst matches of all time, which should have been much better had they had Pat Patterson as an agent, like they did in 1990 for the original match at WrestleMania 6. Hollywood Hulk Hogan versus Ultimate Warrior is just what a fucking clusterfuck that was. Really bad. They did the thing at Halloween Havoc 2000 where Jeff Jarrett like had multiple eras of Sting come to the ring and like do distractions, like very specific. Like that's Surfer Sting and that's Great American Bash 1990 Sting. I think that's one of the things they did. Like it was like very, very niche, which I think in a way I appreciate, but for the time in 2000, I don't know if the viewing audience could appreciate it as much as like a diehard like I can now, to go that specific. Like, can you imagine like in 2000 if they like referenced the, I'm trying to think of an example here. Like, that's Survivor Series 1996 Rock. If they did that in WWF and it was like some guy wearing like the original gear that he wore at the Survivor Series with the fucking gimmicks flowing off his body and it does. I don't think that would have worked at the time. Maybe I'm wrong. I didn't watch Joker 2, which is what I'm going to call it. All I hear is bad things. I did read some of the spoilers on it because I was just very curious, and it sounds like it's kind of a pointless sequel, and it might undo a lot of the stuff of the original. I didn't mind that first Joker movie, honestly. Maybe I should take the time to watch it. Josh, I'm going to need your feedback. Tell me whether I should or shouldn't waste the 2 hours on it. Have I watched The Penguin? No. I think about it because I do think one of the best parts of the Batman movie that came out a couple years ago was the Penguin. I've always liked the Penguin character in general. I've been hearing great things about the Penguin series, but I've been on record to say that I don't particularly care for the Batman movie. I just think it was too long. I understand that they wanted to go like the more hardcore detective route with Batman in this version, which I'm fine with, but it just seemed like he solved everything like way too quick. I don't know. That's just my opinion on the matter. Yeah. Do you believe in ghosts? Yes. I do believe in ghosts. Obviously, Ghostbusters is one of my all-time favorite movies, and it was a very enjoyable haunted house, which I got to experience in Orlando at the Halloween Horror Nights this past weekend. But, I think I've shared this story before, and I'll share it with you again briefly here. One of the main things that cemented my belief in ghosts was this instance. My mom was living in a homeless shelter in 2010, and she contacted my grandfather, her dad, to talk with her about, once again, claiming to try to clean up her life, and, because she had a bad drug addiction. She enjoyed crack. That was her drug of choice. And once again, for the umpteenth time, she was claiming that she was cleaning up her life. And she told my grandpa that this particular week that she went to church, she talked to God, and that she said one day that she will be allowed to walk with him. And she was very happy about it. She was in good spirits. And that made my grandpop very happy because grandpop was a very religious man, God-fearing. And he was set to visit her on July 5th, which was, I believe, a Monday in 2010. And he shows up, checks in at the counter at the homeless shelter, and he looks down the hallway, and he sees my mom down the hallway by the Coke machine. She waves to him, tells him, come on. Like, she doesn't say come on down, but she, signals for him to walk down the hallway towards her and come into this room where she's staying, points into the room, and she walks into the room. And my grandpop throws up one finger as to say 1 minute so he could check in, signs the paper with his name, and the lady at the counter says, "Who are you here to see?" And he says, "I'm here to see my daughter, Gloria Smith. She's right down the hallway there." And, the woman at the counter looks at him stone-faced and says, "Sir, I regret to inform you that, your daughter passed away yesterday." And my grandpop is very confused, and he responds, "I just saw her down the hallway. What are you talking about?" And the lady at the counter leads my grandpop down the hallway to that room that he saw my mom walk into, and it was empty. There was an empty bed, no one in there, and they had to explain to her that she died in her sleep. And I don't know if they told him then and there, but it was a drug overdose. And I don't know. My grandpop, obviously being very religious and never wanted to talk about ghosts, it's always something that I found very eerie and interesting because, maybe if he would have been told before that my mom had died, and then he looked down the hallway and thought he saw her, then I'd be like, okay, well, he was hallucinating. But the fact that he saw her, then got the news, that's wild, So I don't know. Who we are as individuals is so incredibly unique that I'd like to think that, I don't know if I believe in a God, but something has to happen to our spirit, right? So I don't know what that is, and hopefully in some form or fashion at some point, I get to figure that out. But I won't be here to tell you about it. So that's that. Dean Chard, my good buddy from the UK, asks, who's better, Hulk Hogan or Dean Chard? Clearly it's Dean Chard. Why? Because A, you support me. B, you pay for the Patreon. And Hulk Hogan doesn't pay for the Patreon. He actually has me blocked on Twitter. So we don't have to talk about that again. That was years ago. So that's a thing. Eric over on Patreon says, why are all your negative comments on Cagematch in German? Is it from you disrespecting the Arnold Museum? Why aren't they a fan of the Greg Ziller? I have never actually looked at the Cagematch reviews, so I'm not really sure what it says. However, I do feel like for this particular situation, I probably should look at my Cagematch and read the reviews and maybe see if I can translate the ones from German. Let's check this out. Hold on, let me go on the internet. Okay, I'm on Cagematch, and by my math here, it appears that I have 13 ratings on Cagematch, which gives my overall rating 7.38. I don't know if that's good enough for Tony Khan to sign me, but I think that's a pretty solid rating. And actually, my first ever comment on Cagematch is gives me a 6.0 out of 10. This was written on 7/24/2011, and by my calculations, it was one day after CM Punk publicly endorsed me. So let's see what that is translated to from German. I've already seen his matches at Chikara. I have to say that it's impressive what and how he does it. The fact that CM Punk is praising him like that in a promo at this AAW event is worthy of all honor, but he shouldn't hide the fact that he's always somewhat dependent on the right opponents. Nevertheless, in my opinion, he is a more impressive figure in pro wrestling than, for example, B. Zach Gowen, simply because Iron has a lot more charisma. Enough said, continued success. Well, you heard it here first. Make sure you guys tell Zach Gowen that in 2011, there was an individual that said I had much more charisma than he. This is a pretty good compliment, I would say. I don't see the problem with this, Eric. I mean, I was put over by the WWE champion at the time, so that's pretty cool. And but none of my Chikara stuff is very impressive, with the exception of me and Lindsay. I would go on record for saying Lindsay Dorado. And I think I would argue that it's important to have I wouldn't say the right opponents, but opponents that understand that I am a disabled wrestler. I would argue, perhaps maybe that might have been more of the case back then, but I would argue at this point, I don't know. I know my own strengths enough that even if I have the wrong opponents, I can make it work to an extent. Just like you can't out-train a shitty diet, though, you can't make a shitty wrestler great, but you could try your damnedest to level them up a little bit. That's all you can really do in certain situations. So I would say the first review, not bad. Let's look at the next one. Eric, I'm going to copy and paste it into the Google and translate it. This next one was from 7/29/2011. They gave me a 10. So this is not as bad as you're making it out to be, Eric. They gave me a 10. 10 out of 10. And if I can translate it here, we're going to get, stand by, doing some backspacing here. It's not like I have a producer. I'm doing this all on my own, folks. Hats off to this guy. Despite his handicap, he makes the actions believable. Well, there you go. So that's 2 solid reviews right now. You know what? I'm actually going to keep track of what my overall rating is from the German community, because I've got a 10 and a 6 thus far. So let's see what else we got. Okay, the next person gave me a 1. A 1 out of 10. And this was on 11/16/2011. Their comment, translated, says, "Despite all respect for his performance, it's annoying." What's annoying? A guy overcoming the odds, the circumstances for which life threw at him, fighting back against naysayers to try and live my dream. I guess that could be annoying, particularly if you didn't try to live your own dream yourself and just went on the cage match to make a comment. Listen, I'm not salty. I'm just saying. Just seems, I would like the what's annoying to be more specific. So, him Klops, if you're listening to this, who left that comment in 2011, if you could let me know. Also, someone the same day in Germany, which might be Hip Klops under another name, his name is Ariza, wrote a different comment. So literally the same day, but he gave me a 3. I don't know why he would give me 2 different ratings. So I guess there's a chance this could be a different individual. He wrote the comment as follows. Of course, he deserves respect, but I'm definitely not a fan of him. Unfortunately, he can't really convince me in terms of wrestling. Well, that's your opinion, but your opinion is noted. It's fine. It's fine. I'm not upset. Eric, this isn't upsetting me. The next review for my cage match is also a 10. All right. This was written on 2/11/2012 by Enemy of Justice, and his translates to respect for being so stubborn. He's really a wrestler. I don't, maybe that doesn't translate as well, but like, he really is a pro wrestler. Of all the pro wrestlers I am one of them, is something he could have also said, I guess, because that would be a factual statement. But I appreciate the kind words and the 10. Again, Tony Connor, you listen to this? I'm getting a 10. Aldler wrote on 4/16/2013, after giving me a 10, a fucking 10, he said the following. Hold on, copy, paste. Gregory Iron always gives his best performance. It's obvious that he's always working on his skills, and he truly improves his performance every time. This boy has impressed me every chance he has had. Again, this is a very glowing compliment. Eric, I don't know if you're keeping track of this, but, I got a 6, a 1, and 3, but I also got 3 perfect 10s. Now, I don't think I'm a perfect 10. I'm just going by what the German community is writing here about me, okay? On 8/17/2015, the following German folk wrote, translated from German, of course. Of course, he deserves respect for what he does, but I still don't really like him. And I don't think his way of wrestling is particularly good, so he only gets 4 points. But as a person, I still think he's really great. Well, I mean, that's nice. This was written by user Zack Woo 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 Ryder. I don't think that is the same Zack Ryder from WWE television. I can't imagine that he would put his name out there like that. But nonetheless, you know what? It's good that there's a lot of wrestlers that I think secretly suck, and I won't tell them that I would, I'd break bread with. I'd drink some beverages with, but I don't think they're particularly good. So I can understand where they're coming from. So I'll take a victory where I can get it, despite the low ranking of 4. The next one I'm rated as a 10 by the German community here, and this was on 2/18/2023. So this is one of the more recent ones from I think it's the final one from the Germans, and then we can move on from this. Thank you for your question, by the way, Eric, and just trying to rile me up, you son of a bitch, but it didn't work. This is written and translated as, can't rate him yet, but I've seen a few matches from him. So to note, this person ranked me as a 10, but said couldn't rank me, but it's rated as 10. So despite his disability, he makes a solid impression in the ring, and he can move his arm a bit, as he sometimes shows moves with both arms. He has a big handicap with his right hand. He's not bad on the mic either. A review will come when I've seen more matches from him. Edit February 18th, 2023. Rate it now. Despite his handicap, he's really capable of a lot. Okay, so there you go. So he updated his own ranking, and he thinks I fucking rule. So, again, to make you look like a moron, Eric, let's do the math and see what I rated from my German fans on Cagematch.net. All right, so using calculator.net, not a sponsor of the show, and putting in the average of the each number rating, which would be 10, 10, 10, 10, 1, 3, 4, 6, that averages out to an average rating from the German community of 6.75. You know what? I think physically, I'm at least a 7, okay? But I'll take 6.75. When you round that up, I'm basically a 7. So thank you to my German fans, and Eric, you can go F off, pal, okay? Uncle Bobby from Patreon asks, who would you like to work with that you haven't yet? I mean, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. My dream indie match for someone that was in the Fed and is currently working the indies to where it's realistic, Paul London. I love him as a person. I think we have a lot of the same interests, quirks about us. We like terrible movies, and he's a weird guy, and so am I. And he's one of the first indie dudes that I really enjoyed watching. Indie / TNA, and then obviously I loved his stuff with Bryan and WWE, stuff in Ring of Honor. I don't know. Like, I just think it would be, I consider Paul a friend, right? And much like any of the matches you have with your friends, you go a little bit harder. And whether it be, physically, you maybe hit each other a little bit harder, which makes no sense whatsoever. I think you put more stress on psychology and story and making things make sense. And I just think that Paul and I could tell a very nice story. And it would be, I would say, emotional being in there with Paul. It would be like a very surreal thing to wrestle him, especially because, I don't know, he's just always done it at a high level. And I would really enjoy that. And you know what? This isn't in a wrestling match, but you didn't specify that, Uncle Bobby. Someone that I would really like to work with would be someone like Shawn Michaels, to learn psychology from him, learn writing from him, formatting a television show, like what goes into his thought process. Like, he's one of the best to ever do it. So to work with him and gather more knowledge that I could bestow upon others would be something that I could only dream of. Just the stuff that I hear from Gargano. I don't know. We are blessed to live in a timeline where we've got to grow up watching Shawn Michaels and or see a product that has heavy influence from Shawn. It's definitely a cool time to be alive and be a wrestling fan. Bestest friend Mike from Patreon asks, what does Mickey Mouse's dick taste like? Tastes like the most magical dick on earth. Okay, it sounds like, bestest friend Mike, that you're a little jealous that I was at Disney and you weren't. So you know what? Instead of writing your little smartass questions, why don't you just send a text to Samoa Joe, and why don't you ask him if he likes Disney? Because I bet you Samoa Joe's a Disney guy. Yeah, I'm sure he's not posting pictures about it all the time, but I would say I would place money on the fact that Joe likes Disney. Find out and get back to me, bestest friend Mike, you sumbitch. Double J over on Patreon, not Jeff Jarrett, but just Double J, Jay. He says, I think we should do a poll who is for or against Cheetos so I can see who my enemies are. Well, I'll tell you right now. Listen, I don't want to have a feud with you, Double J, but Cheetos are fucking gross. And I can say this as a former poor man myself who still has poor man mentality at times. Okay, I've graduated from buying really cheap tires from the Arab man down the street and decided to invest in brand new tires, because in the long run, if you buy a $100 tire, you will have it for much longer than the $20 tire that you have to replace every month. And long term, it's just a better business investment, right? Cheetos, I always thought, even when I was poor in school, boy, you got to be like super poor to be eating Cheetos. And you get the dust on your fingers. They're fucking gross. I've talked about this before. And you're just doing this to grind my gears, Double J. All right? It's fucking nasty. Double J, I don't like Cheetos. And I'd like everybody to comment, yay or nay on Cheetos. You know who else is not for Cheetos? Eddie Only. Okay? So that's two prominent figures within the wrestling community that are standing up against Cheetos. So make sure that your voice is heard when it comes time to vote. All right? It's a big deal. You know, the decision you make is going to impact a lot of people. All right? I say vote against Cheetos. All right? Say no to Cheeto. Kale over on Patreon asked, what do you think about Samantha Irvin leaving WWE? You know, I'm glad you asked that question, Kale. I you know what? I'm very saddened by it. Because I feel like for the first time in a long time, we got a ring announcer that felt like a part of the show. In the same way that I would say Howard Finkel felt like he was a part of the show. And then you had people that, you know, came in and out that were sort of a part of the show. Lillian, who's now taking the place of Samantha, was one of those. I would say Chimmel was kind of a part of the show, but I think it really only became a thing when he started doing the Edge entrance and getting popular for that. Outside of that, as far as WWE goes, I can't really think of anybody that was a staple. I mean, I guess you could argue Justin Roberts, but my thing is, I don't know, there was something about Samantha that, other than her being incredibly beautiful, I think the emotion she put into the things that she did, the passion, the way she announced things, it endeared you to her, right? I can't think of, like, iconic calls from Justin Roberts, like specific moments, right? I can't think of iconic calls from Lillian Garcia. I could think of those things when I think of Howard Finkel. I could think of them when I think of Samantha Irvin. I think about, as recently as WrestleMania 40, her crying on the mic, announcing that Cody Rhodes was the new WWE undisputed heavyweight champion. The uniqueness of the Chelsea Green intro, which is now being copied by the girl on SmackDown when Chelsea comes out. I don't know, the times that she sung the national anthem. There was something special about Samantha, and whatever the situation is with her contract or her quitting or whatever the situation is, I wish her the best. And I hope, selfishly, that, obviously do what's right for you, Samantha, but selfishly, I hope that all roads lead back to WWE for her, because I think we have something special in her that we haven't had in WWE television in a long time, and I think she's going to be sorely missed. It's a small thing, but in the big picture, it adds so much to the presentation of the show. Okay, I think I got all of the Patreon questions. You would think that I would have more Patreon questions, but these fellows talk to me so much that they know me better than my own family. So that's what we're building on Patreon. It's a great community. If you're not a part of it, you're missing out, because I talk to you guys more than I do my own family. I live with my goddamn brother, and I don't talk to him as much as I talk to people on Patreon. So if you want to have a close, dear, personal relationship with me, Patreon.com is the way to get that started. But until you do that, you can keep listening on iTunes, Spotify, Audible, wherever you download podcasts. We got to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to take your questions from social media if you're not on Patreon, and we're going to get as many of them in as we can, because I know you guys have been waiting for it, and you've got some good questions. So stick around. We'll be back with more Iron on Wrestling. La-da-da-da-da. Walking along on my fitness journey down the street. Don't know who I'll see or who I'll meet. Oh, look, I see some fat burners on my fitness journey. And I also see muscle building supplements and protein. Wow, so cool. Pre-workout too. Pro hormones. Healthy living, jewelry, anything you need over at TNThealth.com. TNT-health.com. Listen, that's not a real jingle. I just made that up, as you could tell by a lot of the lacking of rhyming and rhythm. And quite frankly, after what I just did, I don't want to lose TNT Health as a sponsor, because they really have helped me on my health and wellness journey. And whether you're currently on a journey with health and wellness or you're just getting started, TNT-health.com can help you, I assure you. And if you go check out any of the things that they're selling over on their website, you'll save 10% with promo code IRONON, IRONON. And, I use the glutamine for my post-workout, the creatine for my pre-workout. I also have the Zoom pre-workout. It's got a little bit of the caffeine in it, and I really enjoy that. The vegan protein is something that I can mix with any water, and it just doesn't taste like shit like most protein out there. Great thing about TNT-health.com is the good folks over there, led by Mike at TNT Health, will help you by going above and beyond the call of duty. They're not just trying to sell you a bunch of supplements so you have a big bill every month of shit you essentially don't need. They want to get you started on a couple things that you're really dead set on. They want to help you with your goals, and they want to follow up and figure out your macros, your calories, what you're taking in. They want to make sure that you're hitting your goals. They don't just want you to be buying supplements. They want you to be buying results. Mike is a great dude. He's going to help you in ways you didn't even expect for the prices you're paying. And it's free to look on the website. It's free to contact Mike and the folks at TNT Health if you have any questions or concerns. He's going to get you going. He's going to get you going in the right direction. So, Check it out, tnt-health.com, for all your health and wellness needs, because at tnt-health.com, it's about your health today, not tomorrow. I don't know if you heard the news, but I've got this good buddy, Juan Ortiz, and he's got a company called Of the Dead Designs. He's made incredible designs for nearly every major champion you see in professional wrestling, not just in WWE and AEW, but Ring of Honor, New Japan, TNA, you name it. He's probably made a design for someone, and he's probably had one of their shirts in Hot Topic, or he's probably got his design on one of their action figures. It's a real thing. He's a very, very prominent figure within the pro wrestling community. And yeah, he fucks with Iron on Wrestling. Yeah, he's made designs for us. He's made designs for a plethora of other people. I use the F word because I just get so goddamn excited about Juan Ortiz, and I'm real excited about the floating head sale that he has right now. $100 for design, no alterations. He's doing this until Halloween. You got to DM for more info, but in general, he could do logos for you. Standard logo starting at $100 with an icon, $140. Shirt designs, $25 per hour with a 5-hour minimum. Posters are $25 per hour with a 5-hour minimum. You want him to remake an old design? DM for a quote. He can get back to you ASAP. Anything you want to have happen, he will make it happen for yourself, for your business, for a friend, a loved one, some girl you're trying to impress, some girl that you don't want to leave you, whoever's in your life that you don't want them to walk out of it. Juan is going to save the day. In fact, my good buddy Ben Boone just reached out to Juan, unbeknownst to me, for my birthday, and had him make me a Bart's Nightmare style design, a Greg's Nightmare design, which, you know, if I don't make a t-shirt with, I'm going to do something with the good folks of Patreon and send them something in the mail come Christmas time. Bart's Nightmare, Greg's Nightmare. I appreciate Juan's time. I appreciate Ben Boone, and I think you'll appreciate the discount that you can get with Juan. If you reach out to him and say that you mentioned Iron Wrestling, you can get $20 off your first design. I don't think that is going to work for the $100 design deal up until 10/31, but in general, reach out to him. Save some money. Mention Iron on Wrestling. Juan will appreciate that, and he'll appreciate you if you DM him with any questions, comments, concerns, anything that you want to inquire about. Contact him on Instagram at Of The Dead Designs, Facebook at facebook.com/ofthedeaddesigns, or go to his website, ofthedead.weebly.com, because Of The Dead Designs is bringing artwork to life. All right, we're back, and since we answered Patreon questions first and foremost, now we answer your social media questions. And so, what better place to start than with Bob Willows, who asks, are aliens real? I don't have any evidence to say that they're real, but, I mean, if we exist, I can't see that there's like not a possibility that something else exists out there on another planet or in another galaxy. I mean, I think it's entirely possible. And, you know, stranger things have happened, not the show, but in life. So yeah, I don't disbelieve in aliens. What are your guys' thoughts? Do you believe or disbelieve in aliens? Do you have perhaps a scenario much like my ghost scenario where you might believe in aliens a little more based on a personal experience? Did you ever get an anal probe like Cartman in the very first episode of South Park? Let me know. Anthony Deppin asked, how big is Batista's dick? I don't know. I would imagine fairly large, and I mean he's a big man. I know he's trimmed down in size, but usually when you're slimming down and you're cutting weight, the dong, the circumference, the girth, the length, it usually stays roughly the same size. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I think that is the case based on my own personal experience. Clint Eastwood. I'm sorry, Chris Eastwood, may or may not be related, said, I think Homer gets stupider every year. Yeah, I don't dispute that, but I also still find Homer funny. So, you know, it's changing with the times. A lot of those other characters on other cartoon adult-oriented shows are also, they've always been very stupid, almost from the jump, like your Peter Griffins of the world. So, I mean, like, I think it's kind of just following suit with the trends of what the kids are into, right? I don't know if the kids are into The Simpsons, though. So I don't know why I said that. Riley Swearer says, what was your opinion on the Danielson-Moxley match at WrestleDream? I didn't see it, truthfully. By all accounts, it was an average match. I think Dave Meltzer rated it a little bit higher, but I didn't see anybody going all gung-ho about it. I do wish there was a better build for something that could be Bryan Danielson's last potential full-time match. It's, I think the most important thing is I hope Bryan can be healthy enough to be able to do the things that he wants to do with his wife and his children. And at the end of the day, especially as I get older, that is what is important to me. Especially, with having a niece in my life now. She just turned 6 months old, and having little Quill Gargano in my life. I love that kid to death. I don't want him to die, but that's the term that people say, right? I care a lot about those guys, and it brings a joy into my heart that I can't explain. Now, obviously, they're not my own kids, but, I think the experience of being a kid, and I'm going a little deeper on this question. It's definitely not what you asked. Danielson, Moxley, what did I think? I think the experience of being a kid, knowing how the good and the bad shaped me as an adult, I think it's incredibly important to be a good and positive influence, a happy influence, a funny influence on those guys as they get older. Because sometimes I wish I would have had, a more positive figure in my life to tell me that things were going to turn out okay, and that if you had a dream, that it was okay to chase it, right? Even sometimes growing up, there were things that I would question, like, my dad made me feel weird about liking rap music or hip-hop, so I really didn't tell him that I liked those things. And I went to a very, a more urban elementary and middle school, high school even, for a little bit. And in the Lower West Side of Cleveland, hip-hop and rap and R&B was the music, right? There were your new metal kids, and I always... again, with the influence of wrestling, I always enjoyed my new metal, but I also liked rap and stuff, and my dad would always make me feel bad about it, much like, kids in school would bully me about other shit that they found uncool or stupid or whatever. And so sometimes, the things that I liked with my own family, I couldn't really bring it up because I thought for some reason it was wrong or dumb, and I don't know. I just wish there was somebody around that, always brought a smile to my face and just told me, like, hey, it's cool. Go do that. Go try that. If you fail, it's all right. Keep going. And, again, that's not the answer to your question at all, but I think beyond the act of being a wrestler, whether or not his last match was great or average or a complete stinker, what matters is he's still a human being who has to continue living his life. And I believe that despite the injuries, Bryan will be able to continue to do that, and that's what's important. Brett, can't talk. Brandon Stevenson says, two-parter. Who is the better member of DIY, and why is it Tomasso Ciampa? I don't know. So I think the best tag teams historically complement each other. If you were to go back in time 10 years ago and tell me that Tomasso and Johnny would be a tag team on paper, because they're not similar in-ring styles, I would say, no, that wouldn't work. But also, I don't know why I would do that, because I know that most great tag teams are two different personalities. It's like if you have similar ring styles, it's great. And there are things about Johnny and Tomasso that are similar. But I think about why I like the Hart Foundation as a kid, and this being the original form with Bret and Jim. It's because like Bret was this technical wrestler, and the Anvil was like this big bruiser, right? So what Bret couldn't necessarily do, Jim could, and what Jim couldn't, Bret could. And I think in some ways, Johnny and Tomasso are like that. Johnny can definitely be aggressive. Sometimes he can definitely go Shawn Michaels 1996. I was just talking to him about this recently. Like, I love when Johnny gets hot. He gets heated. It's funny to me, and it's like it's real. I like that fucking side of Johnny. He brings that out in his matches. Like, I know when he turns it on, I'm like, oh shit, okay. But I think like Tomasso, like he just always has like this this power, this aggression about him, right? And he is more of the bruiser of the team. He's a little bit bigger, and I know Johnny isn't. I wouldn't say Johnny's a high flyer, right? But Johnny has always been well with knowing his strengths and weaknesses, and he can create the illusion that like. I think if you were to just say like what kind of wrestler is Johnny Gargano, you might say, he's a very technical wrestler and he's a high flyer. But when you really think about it, Johnny doesn't do a lot of like super crazy high flying stuff, right? He does a suicide dive. He might do a plancha every now and then, but you never really see him come off the top rope, maybe for the occasional crossbody. Now, back in the day, there were some flippy doos that Johnny would do. Like, I think he used to do a gimmick for a second. Maybe he did it. I know he did it for at least one match, but maybe two, where he would like springboard from the second to the third and then moonsault. He can do high flying stuff, but he just doesn't. He doesn't need to. People often compliment me, and at first I would just think like that's silly, but I get it so often that's like I guess I've created this illusion. They always say, one thing I noticed about you is you're so fast, right? And I'm always like, what are you I'm not fast at all. But I guess like constant movement I think is important as a wrestler. If you look at some of the great wrestlers of all time, and I often think of like, Steve Austin is one of the guys that I reference. It's like he's always moving, whether it's on the cell or, beating someone's ass. There's always this movement. Something is happening, and I think it creates the illusion that you're doing more than you are. And less is definitely more, right? So if you're like, just random example, like I noticed something last week on SmackDown where Johnny did a gimmick where as I'm trying to think, who were they wrestling? Street Profits. One of the Street Profits did a flippy dive over the top rope, and as that was happening, to transition to the next spot because it was a three-way, Johnny did a dive through the middle and the third into the ring. And it's like the timing of it is so good and crisp. It's like it's movement, right? It's nothing like that's incredibly challenging, but like it's just it's happening so fast that you're like, oh fuck, this guy is going insane. Again, I'm rambling, but I'm not going to pick one or the other because I'm going to be biased and I'm going to pick Johnny because he's my friend. But I've worked with Tomasso, and Tomasso's incredible, and I love watching Tomasso, and he does some sick stuff that I really, really enjoy, and like I like his aggression. It's there's not many Tomassos out there, and I've always enjoyed his work. Jake asks, favorite part of burying people in the business? I gotta say, listen, I don't like burying people. I like, okay, so here's what I'll say. We all have that coworker or coworkers that we fucking hate, right? We get off the clock, we want to go and we want to fucking gossip or whatever the fuck. It's no different in wrestling. Sometimes I feel like maybe more than other jobs, wrestling might get a little too high schoolish. And you know what? As I think about other jobs too, all jobs are pretty high schoolish, especially when it comes to the gossip. We all have our favorites and our least favorites and people we can't fucking stand or whatever. I won't say my favorite part about burying people is burying them, but one of my unique skills, and if you listen to the show, you know, is ranting. And I like to rant in a very angry manner, and, you know, I make faces and voices and blah, blah, blah. And I like to be over the top about it. I like to sell it, okay? Sometimes I'm not even as angry as I'm making it out to be, but I like to sell it. And I also like storytelling. Perhaps maybe that's why I'm a wrestler. And to build a story about some idiot that I dislike or someone that did something idiotic, and to build that story and take you on that ride through my ranting that may make you laugh, that's what I enjoy about burying people in the business. So I hope that answered your question, Jake. And I don't think that makes me sound like a bad person, because, again, if you claim that you don't bury someone at your job, you're lying, okay? Jeremy Doman says, first country you went to for a match. Well, I guess technically the United States where I live, but Canada would be the only other country that I've wrestled in. I mean, I've traveled to Germany as well recently, but the first time I went to Canada was for a promotion called Spry Wrestling back in 2007. It was a road trip that I took with Josh Prohibition, Johnny Gargano, and Hobo Joe, my former tag team partner. However, we weren't tag team partners that night. Hobo Joe wrestled in like a handicap match against two girls. I don't remember both girls, but I know one was Rosemary. She wasn't Rosemary at the time. She was wrestling under whatever her other wrestling name was. And I was in a tag team match opposite a young Josh Alexander. And obviously we know where Josh has gone, the incredible heights in which he's reached. And we know where I'm at, doing a podcast each and every Wednesday for your listening enjoyment. But yeah, that was my first trip out of the country. Spry Wrestling got me in the door in Canada. Then obviously down the line I would work a lot for Smash Wrestling, which was my first flight anywhere. And Alpha One is a place that I've called a home for a long time, and now Top Tier Wrestling is another place that I've been working in Canada. It's been a good experience. I love all my good friends in the Ontario area. Larry Hutchinson said, what was your favorite wrestling match to watch or participate in? I have a lot of favorites. It's hard to narrow it down to one. It depends on my mood. It depends on my situation in life in that moment. Hogan and Warrior is what got me started. Right now, because I was just talking about the storytelling of it recently and thinking about it when I watched Drew McIntyre and CM Punk, Austin and Bret Hart, WrestleMania 13. There are a lot of Bret Hart matches that I could say are my favorite matches. He brought a realism that I feel like not many people do, and he could make anything work with any opponent. Obviously, his matches with Shawn were great, but then you got a couple classics with the British Bulldog. All those matches with Diesel, the trilogy with Diesel was really great, and I really enjoyed those matches. I mean, I always point to Hogan as the guy that I loved as a kid, right? And then as I became an adult, Shawn Michaels was like the guy that I really, really was like, man, I love Shawn Michaels' work. And I liked it growing up. But I feel like that transition between Hogan and Shawn was Bret, because Bret was next after Hogan was gone to be anointed as the top guy. And there was a period of Lex Luger, because they were trying to make Luger the guy. As an impressionable kid, they could have just started to make anybody the top babyface, and I probably would have liked him just because I liked whoever they told me to like. That being the machine that is the World Wrestling Federation. But Bret was not only the next guy to lead the company, but he's leading the company during the time where I'm growing up. I'm growing out of Hulkamania. And I guess my appreciation for wrestling is growing. And it was always a subconscious thing too, because even when Hogan was around, I would put in a tape and I would watch a Hogan entrance, and then I would fast forward to the big boot, the leg drop, and then I would watch Hogan pose. But if I was going to watch a match from those earlier shows, it was Mr. Perfect and Bret at SummerSlam 91, and it was Piper and Bret at WrestleMania 8, or it was Bulldog and Bret from SummerSlam 92. It was a constant, right? And as Bret's on that rise, you know, Shawn starts to stand out to me at WrestleMania 10 with the ladder match with Razor, and I always enjoyed Razor Ramon as well. And then I really start to... Shawn was one of the first heels that I was like, I think I like this guy, but I don't know if I should, because like you're conditioned to boo the heel, cheer the babyface. But when Shawn won the 1995 Royal Rumble, I remember thinking like, fuck, like that was impressive, right? like no one's ever won it from number one. And when 96 rolls around, I start to really get a deeper appreciation for Shawn Michaels. But I think growing up as a kid, I was more of a Bret guy. I would say by the time I was like, when Shawn came back in 2002, I think that was like, WCW had closed, and I was looking for a guy that like fit my taste as a wrestling fan. I think Jericho kind of filled that void for a little bit. So I would say like, again, I'm not answering your question as my favorite match, but this is going to lead you down the path of what could be one of my favorite matches. Jericho was my guy for a little bit, I feel like 99, 2000, 2001, but then Shawn, I was like, man, it really made me revisit Shawn matches when he came back in 2002 and like look back at him and Diesel from Good Friends, Better Enemies, and him and Mankind in the Mind Games match. And I don't know, man. Like there's so many guys around that time period that really, as I was growing and going through puberty and wanted like a more technical style and a more bloody style and a more gruesome style, like Bret and Shawn were kind of like the best of both of those worlds. They could do both of those things in a storytelling way that I could get invested in and get behind. Like it was never too gratuitous. And I think that's what, we talked about on the show a couple weeks ago. I think that's what I loved about Drew and Punk. They told a good story. And I don't want to say an old school story. They told a story that's what wrestling is at its core, at its root. Wrestling evolves and changes, but the same principles always apply. You got to have someone to love. You got to have someone to hate. But also, I think we've realized over the last few years that the wrestling fan is more sophisticated and understands more than perhaps maybe they've been given credit, especially when you consider the time that we live in and the type of TV shows that we're conditioned to watch, the episodic television programs, and the layers of storytelling that we enjoy. We now get to see that on WWE every single week. And I think, like with the layers of the character of Drew and the layers of the character of Punk, like there are things to both love and hate about them. And I think like in a time where I was growing as a fan, there were things to love and hate about Shawn Michaels, and there were things to love and hate about Stone Cold Steve Austin. There were things to love and hate about Chris Jericho. It was shades of gray. Sometimes shades of gray can be a cop-out, I feel like, but I do think wrestling is best when, you have a definitive babyface and a definitive bad guy, but there are moments where, like, we're all humans, right? We're not perfect, and I think that's why like your white meat babyface hasn't really worked to perfection since the Hulk Hogan era. The only person that's even come close and is doing a great job as that white meat babyface is Cody Rhodes. And I got to imagine at some point, especially with Roman Reigns being back and kind of being that cool top guy, that might backfire on him. I hope that I answered your question, Larry. I went on a big rambling there. Paul Stratodi former cameraman at CAPW, asks, what is your top CAPW memory? Here's a few photos at a time I most remember where you wrestled. He posted some photos from Pro Wrestling Hour Resolution 1 against Johnny Gargano with him bashing me into guardrails. Very legendary photos. Thank you for posting those. As far as my top CAPW memory, nothing tops working with Tracy Smothers. At a time where I was not ready to work with Tracy, I was 6 months into the business. JT Lightning called me on a whim, desperate to be able to pay Tracy at the last minute after he pulled out of a Gathering of Juggalos show where he was being assaulted with batteries from the crowd. He got sick of that shit. He left the tour. He asked JT if he can get booked. And so to justify his pay rate and to put him in something better on the show, JT decided that he would put me in a dark match against Tracy if I could sell 20 tickets. And I want to say that at the time, Tracy only charged JT, and I could be wrong, $350. If I sold 20 tickets at $10 each, that means I could have contributed exactly $200 to that payday. I sold like 17 or 18. JT was pissed. Tracy said, hey man, what do you want me to do with the kid? JT said, I don't give a fuck, job, I'm out. I was very timid and shy. Tracy gave me way more than he should have. Things that I kind of cringe looking back on that I tried to do to him, like I think a leg lariat he sold for me, which I don't do leg lariats anymore because I'm not great at them. He definitely took a suicide dive for me, which he didn't have to do. Tracy was just a good dude, and he knew how to get himself over clearly, and he knew how to get someone else over even when he was beating him. To me, Tracy Smothers was one of the most underappreciated, undervalued wrestlers to come out of the 80s and 90s. But when it comes to my memories at CAPW, my time with him, I appreciate like no other memory that I had in that promotion. So thank you for your question, Paul. I appreciate that. Let's see what other questions we got here. Dave McCormick said, how did you like wrestling for 2CW? 2CW was a promotion that ran in the upstate New York area for a long time. Very prominent promotion. And, yeah, I really liked 2CW. One of my fondest memories, some of my fondest memories, like, I think one of my first shows there, I wrestled Nick Ando, which Nick's a great guy. Struck up a good friendship with him. Long-time staple of the upstate New York area. One of my favorite matches I ever had at 2CW was with Dalton Castle. Now, I knew Dalton from seeing him at AIW at the time. I think when I wrestled him, it might have been 2012. And it was just one of those things where after I wrestled him, I remember having a conversation with him and just being genuine. And I listen, I don't just say these things. I really feel these things in the moment. Sometimes when you're talking to a wrestler in the locker room, you could just tell right away, like, oh, this guy gets it. It's just based on mannerisms and things they say, the ways they say it. When a guy seems to be more giving, I think that is probably a good sign that they know what the fuck they're talking about. I think that's the best way I can describe it. Like, they're willing to do things that make the match better without putting themselves over. And they get over by doing those things that make the match better, if that makes sense. After I wrestled Dalton Castle, I remember talking to him after. I was like, dude, I don't know why you're not signed somewhere. Because there was just something about his positioning and the timing, and particularly when people work with me, if the heat goes too long or they don't keep the crowd engaged, it gets awkward because I think it's a subconscious thing. You're beating up a guy with one functioning arm, a 5-foot guy with one functioning arm. Okay. And so it's I think it becomes a little uncomfortable if you don't work the match right. And I think this goes back to the earlier question of like, finding the right opponent. You got to have someone who at least listens well enough to be like, hey, don't make this heat go long, or else you're gonna lose the crowd. If you lose the crowd, then the match suffers. Clearly, the crowd is so important, and that's one of the things that we realized and didn't appreciate until COVID-19 happened. We had no fucking people in the audience. But yeah, I genuinely said to Dalton, I don't know why you're not, but you need to be signed somewhere. And within time, with more hard work, he ended up getting a shot with Ring of Honor for a long time. Now he's doing stuff with AEW, I think mainly through the Ring of Honor deal. He's on the shelf right now, if I'm not mistaken, but I love Dalton Castle, and that's probably one of my fondest memories from 2CW. I the last 2CW show before I think they did a comeback show not too long ago, wrestling Matt Cross was a fond memory of mine. And AJ Styles was on that show. That was just a couple months before he showed up at the Royal Rumble. So that was 2015, I think it was. And yeah, man, 2CW was good. There was something special about that crowd, and I miss 2CW shows for sure. Harold Pollock says, who has been your toughest opponent to date? See, when you say that, I think you in kayfabe terms, who is your toughest opponent? When I say who's my toughest opponent, that could be anybody who sucks as a wrestler. Because a wrestler, and this is what I try to hammer home in seminars, a wrestler who doesn't have positioning and timing. I talked about it, a week or two ago on the show with an experience I had in Buffalo. If you don't have positioning and timing, I don't care how many moves you have. You can have 100 moves. To me, you have nothing. You have nothing if you don't know where to be at the right place at the right time. A move is great. 100 cool moves are awesome. But if you're not where you need to be, and if you're not keeping the crowd engaged and taking your time selling, if you're not listening, paying attention, feeling the beats of the crowd, that is my toughest opponent. And I do enjoy a good challenge, right? Johnny once told me, you got to bring guys up to your level. But I've interpreted as now, it's you have to create the illusion that these guys are at least on your level. And if they can level up from that, then cool. You can't make it too complicated for them, right? If it's a guy that's been wrestling 5 matches and he has some flashy moves, but he doesn't know how to do an arm drag or a hip toss, you got to accentuate the positives and hide the negatives, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And it's tough working with a guy who is selfish, doesn't know any better. You got to work together, and you have to have ideas. That's important too. I can't tell you how many times I show up to a show where, okay, so you got the guy who has 100 moves and no psychology. Then you have a guy who might have some psychology, but then I ask him, okay, what moves you do? Because now what I want to do is I want to take their moves and my moves. I want to mesh them together, and I want to try to see okay, let me figure out the beats to the story that we're going to tell. And then they just tell me, oh, I do a body slam. I do a suplex. Give me some of your bigger moves. What do you do? What do you do during your heat? Anything during your heat do you do? What do you do for a comeback? What do you do for a cutoff? Or what can you do for a cutoff? And you just give me generic bullshit. Give me ideas. Give me something to work with. Those are my toughest opponents. So that's non-kayfabe talk right there. David Phillips asks, how big is Batista's dick? There's probably a lot of those in here. Bruce Mathis says, did you watch Heels? Thoughts if you did. I watched the first season, and I turned off the second season after episode 1. My problem is, and I think my brother, who's a police officer, had a similar situation, is he has a hard time watching cop shows without picking apart what's real and what's not. And for an indie fed, there's a lot about Heels that I'm I just can't emotionally invest in because it just seems too. It's not real to what indie wrestling is. I really think they needed someone who had been on the indies, both at the bottom and the top, to sort of be a showrunner on there, to kind of create perspective of like, this would definitely happen on the indies, this wouldn't happen on the indies, because even in like Wrestler, for as good as that movie is, there are things like, this would happen on a show, that definitely wouldn't happen on an indie show. So it's like, I think for all facets of life, when we're trying to replicate something that isn't on the biggest stage or the a sector of the world that we're trying to highlight that might be the grassroots of it, in this case independent wrestling, you got to get someone that's had success through the depths of indie wrestling and the highs of indie wrestling to kind of give you of like what's real and what's not in the unreal world of pro wrestling. And so I don't know if there's people out there that suggest that maybe I give the second season of Heels a shot. Let me know why. I know it's on Netflix, but I don't really have a desire to go out of my way to watch it unless you maybe give me some reasons to do so. John Briscoe asks, what was it like wrestling in the COVID era? Sorry. Well, that's a good question. It's funny. It doesn't seem like we're that far removed from it, but it's been like, 4 years since everything kind of went back to normal. It was weird, man. I don't remember doing shows with no fans, but there were definitely shows where, a lot of shows where they were either outside with social distancing or inside with like super, super duper social distancing. And, I think one of the first shows I did, it was like, it was so dumb because like, we're wearing a mask in the locker room and obviously I'm about to go wrestle this person in the ring. We've had our COVID tests. We're fine. We're going to go to the ring without masks on and wrestle. But, the promoter wants us to walk to the ring with masks on. Why? I don't know. The fans were nowhere near us. It just seemed weird that we had to wear a COVID mask and then take it off to then, be incredibly close and sweaty to each other. So, yeah, I mean, it was a weird period of time, but for me, it was also enjoyable because I was still getting booked pretty consistently, specifically at GCW. So I was still wrestling. I was still making money. And, yeah, man, I mean, I'm glad it's over. It was nice to go back to those decent-sized crowds, right? TJ, what's the worst injury you've ever sustained? Well, it depends on what you think is worst, I guess. Concussion with brain bleeding is pretty bad, or brain bleeding from the brain on the tip of your genitalia is also pretty bad. So it's either the dick injury or the near-fatal concussion, which I've talked about in depth on the show before. JJ Garrett says, can I please fucking be a part of the 4-4 Ogasm? JJ Garrett, you will always be an official member of 440. And that's all I got to say about that. Sean Hughes says, what is the square root of pi to 8 decimals? Dude, I don't know. I hated math, and you know what? Having to do advanced math to get a communications degree is the reason why I left college. Because you don't need it. I'm sorry. Unless you're a fan of math and you want to know those things, you know what you need to know? How to count, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, probably fractions. Maybe some percentages. Anything beyond that is pointless to learn in school, in my opinion. You know what they should have taught us in school that they never did? How to do your goddamn income tax papers. That would have been great mathematics that I could have utilized. Why didn't anybody teach me that? Okay. Rob Pinion says, how big is it? Are you talking about Batista or me? I'm I will say that I've never had any complaints. So you could take that for what it's worth. Mark Mackay says, what are you wearing? I'm currently wearing a Mickey Mouse WCW tank top that was gifted me by Johnny Gargano. Kyle Van Hucklen says, are you still a diehard Flaw fan? Oh, boy. What a obscure reference. I wouldn't say I'm a diehard Flaw fan. I loved Flaw coming up in my nu metal days, particularly the first two albums. They once played a concert in Cleveland at the Odeon for 92 cents. They used to do these 92-cent concerts that were promoted by the local radio station, Extreme Radio 92.3. And I saw two of them. I saw Flaw for 92 cents, and I saw Blindside for 92 cents. I don't know if anybody remembers Blindside, but I saw them. And, yeah, man, I don't know. The music of Flaw at the time spoke to me. And, lyrically, with the screaming and the singing. And I think Chris Voles is incredibly talented. And I continue to follow his career once he started doing solo stuff. He started doing stuff with a band called 5 Bolt Maine. I didn't find it out until just recently that Flaw was featured as they sort of made a comeback over the years, a comeback for, whatever it is to make a comeback as Flaw, where they needed a van. They were trying to raise money for a van. And they ended up on Stephen Colbert, which kind of made him look like a joke. I think they've since broke up since getting that van from Stephen Colbert. But for a long time, I got rights from Chris Voles to use an entrance song on Pro Wrestling Ohio. I used to be in charge of getting the rights for music on the TV show because we couldn't use copyrighted music on the show. And yeah, I wouldn't say I'm diehard. I did actually go see Flaw a few years ago. My buddy Ron invited me to go, and I said, there's no way I'm buying a ticket to see Flaw, and I think it was 2022, and Ron was like, I already bought you a ticket, so I went and saw him, and it was kind of sad because there was not a lot of people there. So nu metal, as much as I love it, really didn't withstand the test of time. Tim Nolan says, how are you feeling? I'm feeling great. Thank you for asking. Ralph Varney says, who's your favorite uncle? Real relatives only. Now, see, if you wouldn't have specified that, Ralph, I would have said Uncle Bobby. But since you specified, I would have to say it's got to be Uncle Ralph. My Uncle Ralph, who clearly is asking this question right here, was always so cool when I was a kid. He's not that much older than me. I think there might be like a 12-year age gap, so he's probably pushing 50 if I'm not right. I'm sorry, Uncle Ralph, but like he was really good at basketball, and he did this fucking thing where like he would run up the side of the garage and like dunk a basketball, and he had a Sega Genesis, and he had a Nintendo, and he would help me figure out how to record stuff on the TV, and he was like he had the internet before anybody I knew. He knew how to Photoshop on a computer in like 1994. My Uncle Ralph, he was a DJ. He was the bomb. Uncle Ralph is cool. He's hooked me up with tickets at the Q before, what used to be the Gun Arena. He's just a good man. I don't see my Uncle Ralph enough. So thank you for asking that question, Uncle Ralph. The answer's got to be you. Jim Blaylock says, how many actual bottles of lotion did you sell to wrestling fans? So what he's referring to is I used to do the Girls Night Out shows for AIW, and on at least 2 occasions I did what was called the lubrication station, and I sold Vaseline and, body lotion. I think you could kind of do the math as to why any male wrestling fan would buy that at a Girls Night Out all-girls wrestling show. Not as many as you would think. I also didn't buy a lot of bottles. I probably sold like 10 bottles of lotion and like 5 things of Vaseline, but I sold them for like $10 a pop, and I paid $1 at the Dollar Tree for them and just slapped an AIW label on it. So I made a good profit on that. So yeah, thanks for asking that, Jim. Good to hear from you. Mark Dyer says, Dunbar, what do you think of him? I don't know who this is referring to. If it's If it's Dylan Dunbar, the only Dunbar that I can think of from Texas that used to help promote heavy metal wrestling, then I love Dylan Dunbar. If there's a reference I'm missing here, I do apologize because I don't know. I got to imagine that it's a Dunbar reference, right? Dylan Dunbar. I love him. Steve McGinnis asks, toughest opponents you ever faced. I think I just kind of mentioned that. So I hope that helps you. Go back, rewind the episode a little bit, and we'll just pretend that I answered for you. Steve McGinnis asks, toughest opponent you've ever faced. Now rewind the episode. Keelan Jolly says, what's your biggest struggle in life today? What triggers your anxiety, and how do you fight it off? Good question. So I think I get anxiety about a lot of things, though, and I've talked about it on the show over the past few years. I've really found a lot of peace, and I found that through balance, right? Being able to not put all my eggs in one basket and realize that I can love and do multiple things, and it's okay. And when I say this, it's referring to wrestling, because there were times where just wrestling was my obsession. It was like, if I'm not watching wrestling or doing wrestling or lifting for wrestling, then I'm not doing enough work. But I think now, because there's that, I think I'm a more creative brain than anything. I think that if I'm not creating something, then I feel like I'm wasting my potential. And so then I'm also an overthinker. And so sometimes I'll get in these mindsets and these thought process of like, fuck, I should be working on something. I worry that I'm not living up to my potential. I'm still trying to grow my speaking engagements, which is something that I've been doing online. People will book me for Zoom speaking engagements. I've done a couple in-person speaking engagements this year, but it's something that I want to be doing every month and eventually every week. I would say that it's on par with my dream of, having an active, full-time professional wrestling job. Not necessarily even as a wrestler too, by the way, just anything where I can contribute creatively and help others. And I think that's what I've kind of learned through wrestling about myself is like, I really like creating that spark in someone where, based on the knowledge and experiences that I've had, if I could pass that down and create a spark within someone else and then see that spark start a fire in a positive way, not like burning Vic's shed down. Tune into Johnny Gargano's vlog next week for that one. If I can create a spark that ignites a fire within someone, that's what life's about, right? It's about sharing happiness and laughter. And I think I get a lot of anxiety about not living up to my potential and disappointing the people that I care about most. And I have a small circle of people that I really, really value, that I worry all the time that I'm going to let them down. And I know, being transparent and real with myself, I know that I've let them down. And so in finding that balance over the last few years, I've really gone out of my way to find ways to show my appreciation and love for those people. Because if not for them, I wouldn't be in the position that I'm in. And in some cases, I don't know if I'd be around. So that's as real as I can get with you. And I hope in some way that answers your question. I hope that you have people in your life that bring you up when you're feeling down, make you feel appreciated and wanted and loved, and, bring you to great heights in times when you're feeling incredibly low. I do have a lot more questions here, but you know what? Maybe I'll save them for next week, and we can get Aaron on board to answer some of these with me. I really appreciate all you guys reaching out, and this is probably the best Q&A we've ever had, and I want to do more like this, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. And there's no better way to end with that mental health discussion. So I'm going to wrap things up. Like I said, I've been traveling on vacation all week, just got home, wanted to make sure I had this in the can for you guys. I gotta lift weights before I go to bed. I've only lifted weights one time in the last 4 days, so it's kind of killing my soul. So, with that being said, thank you guys for downloading this episode. Keep supporting us on Patreon. If you're there, patreon.com/Iron Wrestling. If you're not there supporting us, you can be. $3 gets you in the door for all the bonus audio. There's over 1,000 posts in the archives. $5 gets you bonus video. $9, you get to pick bonus podcast subjects. Any of those tiers, by the way, you get priority on your questions for the podcast, and you can send them at any time, and we'll answer them on the show. You also get involved in the Zoom chat if you're on the $9 tier. $25 gets you something in the mail as part of the Howard Animal Steel package every quarter. We got something coming out in December for Christmas time, so get ready for that one. You can go so high up in the tiers that for only $100, you can podcast in the studio once a month with Aaron and I. That's a deal. I don't know where else you're going to get a deal like that where a wrestling personality will be like, hey, come to my studio and podcast with me for one night every month. It's quite the experience, I'll tell you that. You get to eat food with us, hang out, chill. And, yeah, man. Support us on Patreon or support us on ProWrestlingTees.com/Gregory Iron, where you can get my shirts, Aaron shirts, Iron on Wrestling shirts. There's a bunch of out-of-print shirts that we will never have again, so check that out. You can find me on social media. I am Gregory Iron on X, but I am barely on there. I only go on there really to retweet wrestling stuff because I hate X. If you want to really interact with me, go over to my Instagram, Gregory_Iron, or find me on Facebook, Facebook.com/TheHandicappedHero. You can book me there for pro wrestling, motivational speaking, pro wrestling seminars. And this coming Saturday night, I will be in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada for Top Tier Wrestling. I'll be teaming with my brother, Zach Thomas. We are the brothers of Deconstruction. And we will be in action as we take on the team of Hustle and Muscle as they defend their tag team championships. And I got to say, Hustle and Muscle, quite a duo, okay? We got a former X Division champion in that duo. But I ain't mad. I ain't worried. I got my brother by my side, and I think we're going to be A-okay. And, yeah, I don't think I have anything else to plug. Cameo, if you want a shout-out. Make sure you follow the show on social media, Iron on Wrestling. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast wherever you download. Subscribe on YouTube. Appreciate that. And that is it. 90 minutes. Until next week. Hey, I'll see you on the flip side. And we got to end this with a nice, hearty kiss goodbye. Mwah. Tasty.